So welcome everyone. My name is Roy Brouwer. I'm Executive Director of the Water Institute here at the University of Waterloo. Before introducing the speaker of today and sharing some housekeeping information with you, I would like to acknowledge that I'm working at the University of Waterloo on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Holman Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River, as you can see here on the map. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within our Office for Indigenous Relations. And I invite you to briefly consider the traditional territory where you are. The time to introduce the speaker of today in the webinar series on the value of water in Canada, Melissa DeYoung. Melissa is a Director, Policy and Programs at Pollution Probe, Canada's longest standing environmental organization that pursues environmental gains by collaborating with governments, industry, academia, and the public with a steadfast commitment to clean air, clean water, and a healthy planet. She's been working to address a wide range of environmental issues over the past 15 years and is currently responsible for leading Pollution Probe's water and circular economy programs. She's a certified project management professional and holds a master's degree in environmental studies from York University and an honors bachelor degree in political science from the University of Toronto. Since joining Pollution Probe in 2010, she has led various projects related to water quality with a focus on the Great Lakes, nutrients, plastics pollution, pharmaceuticals, environmental health, chemicals management, and transportation. She's responsible for leading the Great Lakes plastics cleanup on behalf of Pollution Probe, an initiative co-led with the Council of the Great Lakes region and with support from a network of funders and collaborators. The Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup is the largest initiative of its kind in the world, using innovative plastic capture technology to remove plastic and other litter from Lake Ontario to Lake Superior and everywhere in between. And today, Melissa will talk about an environmental not-for-profit perspective on the values of water in Canada. Melissa, we're very happy to have you here, and I'm happy to hand over the floor to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that introduction, Roy, and really pleased to be here today. I'm just going to get my slide deck loaded up here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. I guess I just wanted to start off by saying I've had a chance to follow along with the webinar series a bit, and I've really been finding it quite insightful. I think the discussion today is likely to look a little bit different from some of the previous ones in the series, in that our organization does not directly undertake the valuation of water. But what I do hope to do is to be able to add to the broader conversation around the value of water and incorporate sort of the perspective that we have of how water can be seen as a value from the perspective, again, of an environmental not-for-profit, but also how we're contributing to trying to hopefully move the needle on ensuring that all dimensions of water are acknowledged and taken into consideration by decision makers, but really also by all those who have a stake in these issues. So that includes things like filling gaps in data and information that are required to conduct things like evaluations of water and ensuring there's space for the full range of perspectives that need to be considered in these types of discussions. So with that in mind, what I'm hoping to do today is start with a bit of an introduction to Pollution Probe and our work, and more specifically, our approach under the water program, as this, I think, provides context for the rest of the discussion today. I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities that we see as they relate to the value of water in Canada and how the value of water informs our efforts. And finally, I'll talk about, again, what we're doing to contribute to the broader context of acknowledging the value of water and using a specific example of the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup Initiative that Roy just mentioned off the top. I did want to just quickly mention as I proceed that as I'll speak to in a minute, historically, our organization's work has focused very heavily on freshwater and more specifically on the Great Lakes. So a lot of the examples I'll be highlighting today will be situated within a Great Lakes context, but I think have obviously broader applicability outside of the Great Lakes region. For those of us who may not be overly familiar with Pollution Probe, we are Canada's longest standing environmental organization. We were established all the way back in 1969 by a group of students out of the University of Toronto. So we've been around for about 54 years now, and addressing water quality issues, particularly in the Great Lakes, has really been core to the organization's mission since the very beginning. Some of our earliest work involved advocating for improved water quality, which started again with hosting a mock funeral for the Don River here in Toronto in 1969 at a time when the river was heavily polluted. But we've also played an instrumental role in getting regulations put in place to limit the amount of phosphates allowed in detergents, which contributed to the initial recovery of Lake Erie from excess phosphorus back in the 70s. We also wrote the first primer on the Great Lakes in 1986, which covered a wide range of environmental challenges being faced by the lakes. And this is something that we've continued to do up to present day, is write primers and develop different educational materials for a variety of audiences. So the issues that we've addressed over time have obviously continued to evolve based on need, but much of our more recent work has focused on emerging issues in our fresh water. That includes microplastics and plastic pollution and pharmaceuticals, and a recurrence of issues like nutrient loading. We work collaboratively towards progress to achieve clean air, clean water, and a healthy planet, and we really see those things as being intrinsically linked. And we currently have 4 core program areas: water, circular economy, energy, and transportation. I think we do things a little differently than some other environmental organizations, in that we're very much focused on pursuing environmental gains by working together with the full spectrum of stakeholders engaged on an issue. So governments, industry, academia, local community groups, and the public. And this also provides a foundation for our work related to addressing environmental challenges associated with water. We focus very heavily on the importance of engagement and the need to facilitate constructive participation to ensure support for a healthy environment, both today and into the future. Our niche in the environmental movement lies really in our systems approach, which embraces 3 principal drivers for progress. The first being technology and innovation, the second being rulemaking or policy, and the third, behavioral change. So we're often looking for opportunities where technology and innovation can be used as a lever for change. Pretty much everything that we undertake is with the understanding that it will ultimately contribute to better regulation and informed policy development. And there's an understanding on the behalf of our organization and our water program that behavioral change is often a necessary element for successful long-term solutions. We define environmental issues through research, we build understanding through education and engagement, and then we advocate for practical solutions. And finally, our work related to water really looks for approaches that are holistic in nature, and we work to demonstrate tangible progress through effective solutions. I wanted to touch very briefly on some of the challenges that we see facing the ability to incorporate the full value of water in all of its dimensions into discussions related to water management in Canada, again, based on our experience. And I think the first thing to note is that characteristics of water differ quite dramatically from place to place, and the challenges facing our water resources are wide-ranging and evolving at an incredible speed. I think the graphic that I've included on the slide here really helps to highlight the complexity of this challenge. It shows the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals that member states have agreed to try to achieve by 2030, and highlights the fact that water intersects with all of them. Water's either, each of them is either strongly related to water, or indirectly related to water. On top of this, water governance in Canada is also quite complex, and the responsibility for addressing various challenges is often shared across different orders of government and a range of other entities. The regulatory landscape varies significantly by province and territory, with jurisdictional differences attributed to local geography and climate, awareness, prioritization of issues, and resource allocation. And I think this complexity really can't be understated. while water needs to be managed often on a system level, water system boundaries don't always correlate with jurisdictional boundaries. So given the complexity of some of these issues facing water systems, we know that it can take time to understand and gather effective data and information from a holistic perspective, which also has the potential to slow down implementation of solutions. We also know from our work that communities and families and individuals can have very different connections to water, and they can see its value very differently. And a big part of the work that we do as an organization really involves providing opportunities for people to make a greater connection to water, because that's where we see some of the biggest impacts and successes in protecting our lakes and our rivers. It's also, I think, important to remember in discussions about the value of water that while monetization can help put concepts or information into comparable units, and that's a really critical piece of the puzzle, particularly for facilitating communications with decision makers. For many people in communities, it can also be, there can be discomfort around the idea of putting a value on nature. And finally, I think sometimes there are challenges related to the fact that, at least in our experience, there's not always a common definitions or terminology related to the value of water and even water valuation. So this, I think, becomes increasingly important to address and to reconcile as these types of approaches and discussions become increasingly accepted. But despite, I think, some of these challenges, there have been many efforts around the world to try to better address how we look at and manage water, particularly, as the changing climate has further exacerbated a range of issues. And we also have, a number of new and emerging issues to address while still working to find solutions for legacy or recurring issues. There's increasing recognition, though, I think, in the discussions that we have around freshwater in particular, that, health and food security and energy sustainability, jobs, cities, ecosystems, that all of them are being influenced by the way that water is managed. The importance of being able to demonstrate impact and the full value of water has also increasingly become part of the conversation. As an environmental not-for-profit, we have the opportunity to work very closely with governments and with various stakeholders that often have a wide range of issues that they're required to address and prioritize. And different decision makers can respond to different arguments about the value of water and the need for investment to protect and restore freshwater ecosystems. So using a diversity of arguments, everything from monetary valuation to spiritual and cultural value, are really important for highlighting the results of investments from a social and a cultural and an ecological and economic perspective. So being able to point, again, to success and shared values and demonstrate the interconnection between ecosystem health and personal health also contributes to, recognizing the need for investment in different restoration and revitalization efforts. And for us, this is really important for ensuring that issues, rise to the top of crowded agendas that have many competing issues. And it can sometimes mean the difference between whether a project gets support or not. So in 2016, the United Nations and the World Bank Group convened the high-level panel on water to provide further leadership around the need for a comprehensive, inclusive, and collaborative way of developing and managing water resources. In 2018, the panel released their Making Every Drop Count report, and it outlined 5 principles to value water better. So I thought it would be helpful to use this to really highlight some of the ways in which the value of water informs our work, because it does align quite well with these principles. At the end of the day, valuing water resources is in some way intrinsic to all of our efforts, but these are, I think, some of the more specific ways in which this acknowledgement of the value of water in all of its dimensions informs discussions that we have about water management and water governance, and the ways in which we're able to represent the interests of the public. The first of these principles is that the value of water informs our ability to recognize and embrace that water has different value or dimensions of value for different groups. So this principle really speaks to the fact that there is this deep interconnection between human needs and social and economic well-being, spiritual beliefs, and ultimately the viability of ecosystems over the long term. And we work really hard as an organization to ensure that when we're out in the community and when we're being consulted or in discussion with decision makers, that we keep in mind that water does have these different meanings to different people, and that all of these perspectives are important and play a role in determining how we address the challenges that we face. The second principle is related to reconciling these different values and how working towards that can actually contribute to building trust, particularly where decision-making is concerned. This aligns very well with the need for equitable and transparent and inclusive decisions when addressing water-related issues. I think as we all recognize, trade-offs are going to be inevitable, and processes need to be able to adapt in order to contribute to addressing evolving challenges and changes at both the local and the global level. But ensuring there's also an understanding of how these trade-offs are determined and by whom is important, and that all those with a vested interest in the outcomes of these decisions have a chance to be heard. Acknowledgement of the value of water also helps to inform the protection of our water resources, our lakes, our rivers, our watersheds, both for today and into the future. And then capturing the value of water is an important element of education, engagement, and empowerment. And this is an area, again, that Pollution Probe has a lot of experience with, whether that's through developing the types of resources that are needed for different audiences, reports, primers, fact sheets, online content, or through educational campaigns or on-the-ground community engagement. Our messaging always works to showcase the importance of understanding the value of water in our water bodies. And then finally, an understanding of the value of water in all of its dimensions obviously helps to inform discussions around investment in institutions and infrastructure and information, but also in supporting innovation, whether that's with new ideas or tools or solutions that are innovative, but also draw on existing and Indigenous knowledge and practices in a way that furthers that innovation both now and into the future. So as I mentioned earlier, in addition to the ways in which we see the value of water informing our efforts, we also look to contribute to ensuring that the foundation is in place to better acknowledge and integrate the value of water into policy and decision-making, and when we engage the public. So I'm going to just highlight some of the ways that we're doing that, and then I will turn to an example of the Great Lakes plastic cleanup, because I think it really illustrates how we're doing all of these different things within one single initiative. So the first way that we are trying to support, the integration of the value of water into discussions around water management is by improving data and information. And this really goes back to the old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. I think all of us probably on the call here today recognize that in order to understand water and all of the variables that are at play, we need data and information, whether that's related to water quantity, water quality, distribution access. It's absolutely critical for effective decision-making. And that's for, a business who's managing a production process, or those responsible for water governance, and also for communities, responsible for managing their local watersheds. And I think while we have a strong focus on data and research and the importance of science in Canada, the rate at which our environmental and water risks are changing and evolving is unprecedented, and often makes it difficult for data collection efforts to keep up. Where we do have data, it can sometimes be difficult to access. And there are a range of challenges, facing ecosystems today, where we haven't yet begun to truly figure out the best way to collect data. Cumulative effects are another area where, it can take years sometimes to fully understand the full range of potential impacts and how things are interacting with one another. So all of that's, I think, important or speaks to the need to further ensure that we're collecting and providing as much data as we can. In 2022, Pollution Probe undertook a comprehensive review of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in support of the International Joint Commission. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement is a binational framework to coordinate efforts to manage and protect the Great Lakes that was initially signed by Canada and the US back in 1972, but which has been updated a couple of times since then. And as part of this work, we conducted a series of interviews with key subject matter experts and decision makers. And one of the main things that we heard across the board throughout this process is that despite support for research and science and studies, there's really a need for more data, and that, you know, that extends to capturing the full value of water in the Great Lakes, but also just ensuring that decisions that are made about protecting them and implementing specific projects or measures are always based in strong science. Another place where we're playing a role is by helping to build understanding of the full value of water in its many dimensions. And as I've already noted, there's also a need to clearly communicate the value of water. And this often looks quite different depending on the audience. You know, for example, where we engage with the public, there can sometimes be a disconnect between our day-to-day lives and an understanding of the impacts of our activities on our water systems, you know, particularly in terms of recognizing the full range of direct and indirect risks associated with those activities. So a recent survey conducted by the Valuing Water Institute found that survey respondents ascribed a wide variety of values to water, but that the majority of these were really related to the value of water for humans. So things like, you know, agricultural products, renewable energy from hydroelectric power stations, a sense of identity or connection attached to rivers or lakes. And I think that tells us a lot about, you know, the ways in which we can currently work to ensure that the value of water is being included in discussions around water management. But it also leaves, I think, a lot of room to continue to further communicate things like the intrinsic value of water. And then finally, this really kind of ties in with the third way that we're working to contribute to support the recognition of the value of water, and that's by supporting collaborative efforts, particularly as they relate to engagement. So communicating and drawing attention to the important work that others are doing around things like the valuation of water is one of the ways that we as an organization can help to ensure that some of these ideas and approaches gain further recognition and traction. One thing I think that's been really clear to me following this series is that there are a number of important approaches to valuation that are underway that can help define programmatic and policy successes, and to ensure that they're meeting pressing needs, and that, you know, I see a lot of opportunities to be able to communicate those successes in a way that resonates with different audiences. Going back to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the most recent iteration of the agreement from 2012 assigned significant responsibilities to the International Joint Commission to consult on a regular basis with the public about issues related to the quality of the waters of the Great Lakes, and to increase awareness of the inherent value of the waters of the Great Lakes as a means of taking individual and collective action to restore and protect them. So right within the language of the agreement itself, there's recognition of this need to ensure that we're continuing to communicate about the intrinsic value of water, and that that's necessary for effective water management. So I think that provides an excellent foundation for further collaboration and engagement around the value of water, and strengthening partnerships and increasing cooperation is going to be really important, you know, because we need to come together and take all of these different perspectives into account. So as I mentioned, I wanted to just quickly introduce an initiative that we co-lead with the Council of the Great Lakes region, which is our Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup. Because again, I think it's an example of where we're sort of putting into practice some of the things that I've just talked about. To provide a bit of context, plastic pollution in our freshwater systems has been an issue of increasing concern, and something that Pollution Probe's been working very hard to address over the past several years. particularly in the Great Lakes region. The Great Lakes are clearly an important watershed. They form the largest freshwater system in the world, with 21% of the world's and 84% of North America's surface freshwater. And we know that plastic pollution is having a wide range of effects on wildlife and ecosystems and human health in the region. Researchers have estimated, based on modeling, that around 10 million kilograms of plastic are entering the Great Lakes every year, and that the majority of that is microplastics, or plastic pieces that are smaller than 5 millimeters in size. And that the concentration of some of these microplastics found in the Great Lakes are on par with those found in our ocean's garbage patches. There have been some examples of estimates developed to capture the potential costs associated with cleaning up plastic once it finds its way into the environment in the Great Lakes, whether that's through beach cleanups or lake cleanups, or the installation of stormwater capture devices, and support for anti-litter campaigns. So clearly it's an important issue, and one that there are significant challenges associated with addressing. So with all of this in mind, in 2020, Pollution Probe and the Council of the Great Lakes region launched the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup, with support in our initial year from the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and lead corporate sponsor Nova Chemicals. The initiative is the single largest of its kind in the world, and it employs a combination of technology deployment, data collection, and engagement of local communities to collaboratively find meaningful solutions to plastic pollution in the Great Lakes. We have a total of over 135 sites participating across the binational Great Lakes region, where plastic capture technologies are installed or in operation, and that are collecting plastic and other debris or preventing it from entering the lakes. One of the greatest strengths, though, of the program is that we've built a very strong network, and there's collaboration across a wide range of organizations, each of which really brings its own expertise and experiences related to plastic pollution to the initiative. When we launched in 2020, we had a total of 37 organizations working with us, and since then we've grown to more than 100 collaborators and counting. Our network includes governments, industry, business, technology providers, academic institutions, local community groups, environmental not-for-profits. So really the full range of stakeholders engaged on the issue of plastic pollution. As I mentioned, the first element of the initiative is its focus on piloting various types of innovative plastic capture technologies that are now in the market, either to prevent or to remove plastic from our water bodies. There are some examples on the slide here. I'm not going to go into detail, but we're piloting a number of different types, from floating trash skimmer to beach cleaning robot to remote controlled drone. And we're doing this across different geographic areas and under various climatic conditions. Each technology really has its own strengths and weakness, and perhaps most importantly for the discussion today, different price points, different capacities to remove waste over different timeframes, different requirements for operation and maintenance. And this is important information that we're able to collect together with our network in a real world environment to really build out a more detailed picture of how these types of technologies can factor into discussions around the cost of addressing this widespread issue across the Great Lakes. And the cost effectiveness in particular, I think, is something that's not very well understood for many of these technologies, as they are newer to market. And there's not, on top of that, a good understanding of how some of the intangible benefits of these technologies, like their ability to educate and to engage, and play a role in preventing pollution further upstream. We're also collecting data on the plastic that we capture in these plastic capture devices, which I think is critical for further building understanding about the full extent of the plastic issue in the Great Lakes, and which can be used to contribute to a wide range of other research and studies, including future valuations. So we do this in a couple of ways. The first is that we have our sites provide a bit of data on a daily basis. So things like the weight, anything that's visible in the bin, and information on weather conditions. But then a number of times over the course of the season, we have our waste characterization network and partners who will go in and do a deeper dive and do some further sorting and characterizing of all of the plastic that is collected in the devices. This season, we also had the opportunity to pair some of our data collection through a collaboration at Queen's University, where they were interested in collecting water quality data in proximity to some of our plastic technologies that are installed in the lakes. So again, that provides us additional information about water quality in some of the areas where we have technologies installed. And this slide right here is really just highlighting some of the data that we're collecting. It shows, the different types of plastic, including top items, but also how what we're finding varies quite considerably across all of the lakes. And we've really been able to start highlighting and better understanding the amount of plastic that's captured in different locations, and also by different technology types. But I think one of the things that we're most proud of with our initiative is that we are able to provide important stewardship opportunities and a deeper connection to the Great Lakes through outreach and engagement efforts with local communities. And this has provided us with a really effective means of both, again, communicating the value of the Great Lakes to those in the community all across the Great Lakes region, but it also allows us an opportunity to collect input and feedback about what communities and families and individuals connect with around the lakes. Why they think they're important, why they think it's important to protect them, why they want to be involved as part of the solution. So when we attend local events or when we hold an event to collect data, we also survey participants to ensure that we're getting feedback and that we have their voice that's now able to contribute to that conversation. We've also had a number of decision makers out contributing to our efforts in person, ministers, MPPs, local mayors, councillors. So this also provides us with a great opportunity to have those types of conversation about the value of water while we're looking firsthand at what it looks like when plastic pollution finds its way into the lake and some of the impacts that it can have there. So the ability to engage and communicate to enhance awareness of the value of our local water bodies and our natural resources, again, is really critical for furthering our collective efforts to better understand how different groups value water. And we can, again, collect and provide that information to others who may have an interest in furthering that conversation as well. And these are just a few of examples of where we've seen some of our efforts already contribute to broader impacts, including as they relate to policy development. So one of the things we've been very successful at with our initiative is being able to provide access both to our data, but also to some of the plastic that we're collecting with our capture technologies. We can provide that to academic institutions and to student groups for the purpose of furthering their own research and studies related to plastic pollution in the lakes. I think sometimes it can be challenging to gain access to things like weathered plastic. So that's one way that we're able to contribute those to further work and data and information gathering. But the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup in its data was also cited as supporting evidence for a private member's bill that was put forward in 2020, Bill 228, Keeping Polystyrene Out of Ontario's Lakes and Rivers Act, which was designed to reduce polystyrene pollution by requiring that any polystyrene foam used in the construction of docks or rafts is fully encapsulated. And then finally, we've been working together with the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada and supporting their efforts related to Operation Clean Sweep, which they are responsible for in Canada. Operation Clean Sweep is a voluntary industry-led program to reduce the amount of pre-production plastic pellets that escape from industrial facilities into the environment. So that's another way that we're contributing to broader change.
Melissa, your previous slide didn't show.
Oh, it didn't?
It got frozen. Maybe just quickly click back exactly this one.
This one? Okay.
Yeah, we weren't seeing it.
Oh, okay.
But we heard you talk about it.
Now. Okay, good. I think I was just going to end off by talking a little bit about where I think as an organization, we see there are opportunities and needs in the near term that can be addressed as they relate to the value of water based on some of what I've talked about today. The first is by, again, continuing to work to fill those data and research gaps and perhaps with a longer term goal of focusing on being more proactive in terms of how we look to address water related risks and issues rather than being reactive. As I've noted a few times, I think it's also incredibly important to continue to gather broad and diverse input and to ensure that the full range of perspectives are included in discussions about the value of water, which ties in again with the need to, I think, determine mechanisms that can effectively incorporate or consider both Western science and also Indigenous knowledge as ways of ensuring, again, that all dimensions of the value of water are really being considered, which, again, there's a need for continuing to build understanding at the community level. And that's really critical. I think communities are often at the forefront of having to contend with or address many water-related challenges, but there's not always a full understanding of work that might be done in other sectors that could be of use to them or value to them as they take on some of those challenges. And again, we all know that there are also vulnerable communities that need to be taken into consideration in those discussions as well. And then finally, it all, I think, comes back to communication at the end of the day, crafting appropriate messaging and being able to effectively communicate around some of the impacts and the dimensions of the value of water is really critical for ensuring that we can continue to support these types of approaches. And there's still a lot of room, I think, here to continue to improve on what's been to date. So I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to you, Roy, for questions, if there are any.
Thank you, Melissa. Excellent. Very clear overview and a very clear message as well about the communication. We have time now for questions. If you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. I see we have one question already. I propose we start with that one, and then if anyone else online would like to ask Melissa a question, please enter it in the Q&A box, and we'll get to that after we looked at the first one, which is a question by Kathleen Cameron. And she says, there's a lot of plastic waste entering our water systems via simple washing of clothing, given that a massive amount of our clothes are now synthetic. Has there been a move to get special filter systems mandatory for all washing systems? Is there a question?
Yeah, I think that there has been definitely efforts towards that. That's not something we're specifically engaged in through our Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup, but I know there are organizations, Georgian Bay Forever, for example, who have piloted some of those technologies in different communities and municipalities to get a sense of, first of all, I think just how much plastic those are actually removing and how much we're able to see a difference from those. But ultimately with the goal of determining whether having some of those things required in future is necessary. I think there have been various discussions around sort of who needs to be responsible for implementing something like that, whether it's, manufacturers who would have a filter, included in a washing machine, for example, at point of purchase or when you purchase one, or whether there needs to be government, support for requiring that kind of thing at all. So I think I can point you in the direction of some of the work that's been done and some studies, if that's something that's of interest to you, if you wanted to reach out to me and send an email.
Yeah, maybe just in addition, you may have heard that France is the first country to make it mandatory. It's from January 2025 onwards. All washing machines have to have a microfiber filter in the washing machine. Thank you very much, Melissa. Please enter your questions in the Q&A box. I have a question maybe myself while we wait for some additional questions to pop up. So you were talking about the Great Lakes Cleanup Initiative. That's an amazing initiative. I was just wondering, given the fact that you started off by talking about Pollution Pro, being so engaged with the multiple stakeholders associated with different environmental challenges. My experience here in Europe, at least, is that typically the plastics industry is often missing from some of these initiatives. And I was wondering a little bit what the situation is with the Great Lakes Cleanup Initiative. Is there any connection with the plastics industry there?
We do, yeah. In fact, our lead corporate sponsor, Nova Chemicals, is a resin producer. So we definitely have input from the industry. As I mentioned, on a lot of our work, we also work very closely with the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada. So we have discussions there. And I think in Canada, in North America, I should say in general, there have been a lot of different ways that the chemical industry or the plastics industry have shown leadership in trying to address some of the issues that we're seeing. I think something that we always talk about at Pollution Probe is that plastic in and of itself is not the issue. The issue is ensuring that it's appropriately managed, that it's not finding its way into the environment, and that we're supporting this move towards more of a circular economy for plastic. So I think, the Canada Plastics Pact, we are an implementation partner on that. And, that's primarily made up of different plastic companies who are all working together to support that transition to a more circular economy. So I think there's always going to be some industry members who are not quite there yet, or who are not quite where they need to be. But I would say that we have had a lot of leadership in Canada around this issue, and support for initiatives like ours that are working to address the issue of plastic once it finds its way into the environment.
Very impressive. Thank you for your answer. Thank you. There are no other questions. I have another one, if you don't mind.
Please.
I was also intrigued by the start of your presentation, where you talked about the importance and the relevance of that diversity of values. I was wondering whether you had any experiences or maybe examples of cases where you do try to identify these important social, cultural, spiritual, and intrinsic values, but where they often lose the battle when it comes to comparing them with the more harder or monetary values of water. Do you have any experience of cases where that actually happened, that you try to account for them, but then in the end, possibly they didn't successfully manage to influence the decision, or the other way around, perhaps, where they actually did maybe even resulted in a different decision?
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example in practice, but I will say, I think in terms of a lot of the discussions we have, and I'll go back to the example of the study on the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement that we conducted in support of the International Joint Commission. I think through that and working with different stakeholders and having those conversations, it became very clear that there has been a shift towards recognizing some of those things more fully, particularly where water governance is concerned, and trying to incorporate some of those discussions and those values into things like the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, which I think traditionally was not the case, but where we've seen really consensus across the board that those things do need to be a part of the discussion moving forward. And I think that's a big success, just in terms of having people come together and agree on that type of on ensuring that those types of values are captured. So I think not a specific example, but I do see that being a part of the dialogue and the discussion more than it ever was before. And I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah. I believe you're referring to the 3 annual poll that they're running. Is that right?
Well, we had conducted a review in recognition of the 50th anniversary of the agreement, and I think that was an internal document. It's not public, but I think that work will inform some of the other efforts that have been underway in terms of getting public or the public consultation side and understanding the views of the public as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I meant the IJC runs this 3 annual poll, I believe, a public consultation poll, which wasn't there, I think, before, which might actually be based perhaps on the review that you did. Yeah, so that's great. Any other questions from the audience for Melissa? If not, thank you so much, Melissa, for the wonderful presentation. Really great overview, very, very interesting, very insightful, clear messaging, and thanks also for answering the questions. I want to thank the audience participating today in the monthly webinar. I look forward to see you again in about a month's time on the 15th of November when we have our next speaker, Caroline Johns from the Toronto Metropolitan University, talking about the value of nutrient offsetting programs to improve water quality, and I believe also that will be focusing to a large extent on the Great Lakes. Thank you all for participating. Melissa, thank you so much for your time for the presentation, and looking forward to see you all again in a month's time on the 15th of November. Thank you.
Thanks so much.